Daf Ayin Ches, Amud Aleph. We are just a little bit like, so it looks like around 6 lines down from the top at the 2 dots. So the Mishnah said, Mayim Kedei Losuf Bahen Es HaKilor. You're chayiv on Shabbos for carrying out water, the amount that you need to mix with this eye medicine, this like ointment that you put in the eye, which was apparently very commonly used in those days, as we'll see that tomorrow. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Mechti, let's analyze this. Kol milsa de shchicha v'loy shchicha, any item which we have a common use and a less common use for, azul rabbanon basar de shchicha lekula. So the rabbanon would consider the more common use, even if it means being more lenient. So like we explained in the Mishnah, Rashi explained, what we mean by chamor and kal with regard to amounts, more lenient and more stringent, whenever the Mishnah gave us a bigger amount, that's a leniency, because you have more, you're allowed to carry more of it. Whereas if the Mishnah gave us a smaller amount, that's a chumrah, that's a stringency. So the item in question, if it has more than one use, the Chachamim would even go lenient if that's the more common use. Okay, so we'll see where we're getting with this. Shchicha v'shchicha. Let's say you have 2 ways you can use this item, and they're both common. They're both the normal way to use this item. Azul rabbanan basar de shchicha l'chumra. So then the halacha is going to be the rabbanan are going to take on the one that's more chumra, because they're both equally used just as often. Azul rabbanan basar de shchicha l'chumra. The rabbanan are going to take on the more stringent one. So the smaller amount that you're going to be chayiv to carry out the smaller amount on Shabbos. Yayin, the Mishnah told us that the amount of wine to carry out that you're chayiv on Shabbos. Shtiyasai shchicha, refuasai loy shchicha. Drinking wine is more common. Using it for medical reasons, refuasai as a refuah, for healing purposes, loy shchicha, is not as common. So therefore, in that case, azar rabbanan basar shtiyasai, de shchicha, lekula. So the rabbanan went with its more common use, which is drinking, and they went lekula, which is a smaller amount. Like we said in the Mishnah, you only need to have a quarter of a revius of undiluted wine. Chalav, milk. So achilasai shchicha, using it for food, is common. Refuasei lo shchicha. It's much less common to use it for healing, for medical reasons. So therefore, what was the halacha there? Azul rabbanan basar achilasai lekula. Again, the Chachamim took the smaller amount, which is the amount of one swallow, we said in the Mishnah. So if you carry milk on Shabbos, you're chayiv. For the Chachamim were lenient because the more common use was for eating. Devash, honey, achilasai shchicha, refuasai shchicha. So here you have something which you have 2 ways to use it. They're both common. By honey, you could eat it, or you could use it. It was also very commonly used as something for healing, for refuah, for medical reason. So like we said, the rule is the Chachamim took on the more stringent, the smaller amount. You're chayiv to carry out the smaller amount. That's why the Mishnah told us that by Davash, the amount that you need to smear on a blister, that's the amount you would be chayiv for on Shabbos, for carrying. Elo mayim, by water, mechti. Let's analyze water. Shtiyasei shchicha, refuasei loy shchicha. Drinking is more common for water, and using it for refuah, for healing, is less common. So my time azul rabbanon basa refuasei l'chumra. Why did the rabbanon take on the more stringent, the smaller amount by water, and it measured it by the amount we would use to mix together with this eye medication? Why did the Chachamim take the less common use and go l'chumra? This is not like we've been saying, the Gemara has been explaining of the normal way the Rabbanon decided on the sizes. Amar Abaya begalila shanu. This halacha, when the Mishnah said we take you're chayiv to carry water on Shabbos, even a very small amount, enough to mix with the medicine, that was only in Galila, in the Galilee. Why? So there's a few ways to understand this. According to Rashi, they were very poor, and like we explained, this kilor, this kind of ointment that used in the eye, you could mix many different liquids with it to make it work. Water is just one of them. But since in the Galil they were poor, they would never use anything but water to mix together with this kilor. So therefore, it becomes more commonly used. So in Galil, it was maybe as equally used for medical reasons as for eating or drinking, and therefore the Chachamim took on the more stringent one because it's also shchicha, it's also considered common use. Other Rishonim explain that the water in the Galil was very good water, and it was more healing than any other liquids. So they used water more often in the Galil. So again, it becomes more shchiach. And another way in the Rishonim is that exactly contrary to Rashi, they were very rich in the Galil. And since they were rich, they never drank water. They only drank wine or fancier beverages, more expensive beverages. But water, they didn't use it for drinking. Rather, they used it more commonly for refuah, and that's why the Chachamim took on the very small amount which you need for this kilor. Okay, Rava Amar Afilu Tema B'Shar Mekaymes. You can even say it's other places, not just the Galil. Even in other places. Even in other places, we use a small amount of water to measure how much you're chayav for on Shabbos, and it's Kiddush Shmuel. It's going according to Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, Kol Shakaini, any liquid, any drinks, Masu, they heal the eye, Umetalali, but they also cloud it over. They also it forms a crust if you put any other liquid in. Labar mimaya, except for water. The masu, it heals the eye, veloy metalli. It doesn't form this crust and blur your vision. So that's why water is better. So since water is so good for this remedy, it becomes a common use. So the Chachamim took on the smaller amount and were more stringent. Okay, the Gemara continues, quoting the Mishnah. V'shar kol hamashkin b'revius. All other liquids, we'll see in a second, even not drinks, because we're going to talk about blood. All other mashkin b'revius. In order to be chayav on Shabbos, for carrying, you have to take out a revius halug. Tana Rabbanon, dam v'chol minei mashkin, blood and any other liquids b'revius. The Brisa says, in order to be chayav on Shabbos, you have to carry out a revius. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, "Dam kidei likchol lachul be'ein achas." Enough to smear this, or to medicate one eye. That's how much blood you need to be chayav. So he argues on the Tanakama. It's the same Reb Shimon ben Elazar. We mentioned that he holds. It goes by what you're using it for. If you have a specific use for a smaller amount, so then you would be chayav for that, carrying out that amount. So he holds it's a common use to use blood as an eye medicine. So enough to medicate one eye you're going to be chayav for carrying that amount on Shabbos. Shekain koichlin librakis, because they used to use blood to medicate this ailment of the eye, like it was a protrusion of the eye, something like a piece of the eye was protruding or something like that. A speck. Okay, a speck was protruding. So enough blood to medicate that would be you would be chayav to carry on Shabbos. Umay nihu. What is this? What kind of blood are we talking about? Dama de tarnagoles bara. We're talking about a wild chicken. The blood of a wild chicken was used for this eye protrusion. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says also dam kidei lakchul boy einachas. Enough. How much blood are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Enough to medicate one eye. But he says shekain koichlin liyaroid. They used to medicate the eye from a cataract. Rashi says another pshat also for white spots on the eye. So umay nihu, what kind of blood did they use for that? Dama de krushtino. They used the blood of a mole. So we have two remedies here: wild chicken for the eye protrusion, and the blood of a mole for a cataract. So the Gemara gives us a siman how to remember which one is for which. The simanech, the siman is the reminder: gava la gava, bara la bara. The inside for the inside, and the outside for the outside. What does this mean? The mole, which was commonly found in an inhabited area, like in the city, so that's used for this problem with your eye on the inside, which is a cataract.
What do you mean by a mole? M-O-L-E.
Right.
M-O-L-E.
That's like a growth on your skin?
No, like
the blood of this animal.
The rodent.
A little, yeah, rodent.
Mouse. Oh.
Okay.
It's a wild animal.
And by the way, the Gemara tells us that it's found in inhabited areas, so if you see one, you'll know what it is.
How would they know this works? Like, how would you even come
I guarantee you, blood of a chicken on your eye doesn't work. Not for cataract.
Well, you've never seen one of these chickens.
No, you got the wrong thing. Chicken blood is not for cataract. It's mole blood. Have you tried
How do
it?
you know that?
How do you know?
I know an awful lot about cataract.
Have you ever tried it?
Try it. Let us know.
I already had the surgery.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what's the siman? The outside, the inside one for the inside. So the mole, which is found on the inside, you find it more commonly in inhabited areas. So that's used for the cataractors on the inside of the eye. Bara la bara.
Save a lot of money.
But this wild chicken blood is used for the protrusion of the eye, which is a problem with the eye on the outside of the eye. So that's how you remember it, because these wild chickens are found outside the city. B'med var mamurim.
I'll tell you why it won't work.
Yes.
Cataract is on the outside of the is on the inside of the eye.
Yes.
It's over the lens, the skin over the lens.
Right.
The cornea is on the outside, in front
Okay.
of the lens.
Okay.
So if you put blood on the cornea, that can't do anything for the lens that's behind it that's got the skin growth over it.
I'll take your word for it, but the Gemara, I trust the Gemara also.
I'm just telling you, it can't theoretically work.
Okay.
I disagree, but I'll talk about it later.
Okay, when do all these? The Gemara just went through a number of different items and says the minimum size that you'd be chayiv, the minimum amount that you'd be chayiv for carrying on Shabbos. When does this apply? B'maytzi. That's talking about when you're transferring it from one rishus to another rishus on Shabbos, when you're carrying it on Shabbos. Avo b'matzniya, when you're storing it away, then kol shehu chayiv. Even a very, very small amount, a kol shehu, a little bit, you'd be chayiv, even less than the sizes that were given here in the Gemara. So we're going to ask, the Gemara is going to discuss this brisa because the difference between maitzi and matzniya, right? That's what you want to know? What's your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, maitzi means to carry, matzniya means to store, but you're not chayav for putting something away.
Yeah.
It for sure also has to be talking about carrying. So the Gemara will explain this. Rabbi Shimon Omer b'medvar mamurim b'matzniya. He says the opposite. Rabbi Shimon says, when do these sizes apply that you're chayav for carrying out this amount, this measurement, this amount? That's b'matzniya. That's only if you store that amount. Avo, that means you have a use for it. Avo b'maitzi, if you're just carrying it out just like that, without, you're not somebody who needs specifically that amount. Then it goes to the default amount, which is a revius. In order to be chayav, you have to carry out more. It's a revius. These small amounts are only applicable to somebody who stores those amounts. The Chachamim would agree to Reb Shimon when somebody's carrying out wastewater, the Rishus Harabim, to a public domain, sheshiuran b'revius. There, the minimum size is going to be a revius. And the Gemara is going to explain this also. The Gemara is going to take apart this brayso right now. Amar Mar. Bamed var mamurim. This is quoting the brayso that we just said. Bamed var mamurim b'maitzi. When do these amounts apply? B'maitzi, when you're carrying it out on Shabbos. Aval b'matzniya, when you're storing it, kol shehu. Then even a kol shehu you're chayiv on. So the Gemara asks your question: Atu matzniya lav maitzihu? Is storing it not carrying it? Because you're definitely not chayiv for putting something away in the cupboard. You definitely has to be talking about some sort of carrying. So what does this mean? Amar Abaye, hacha b'mayaskinon. The Talmud, she'amar loy rabbi, we're talking about a Talmud, like a student, she'amar loy rabbi, that his teacher told him, lechu pnei li hamakom l'seuda. Go clean up the place, let's say the items on the table or whatever it is, clear the area for a suda. We're going to have a meal. So halach upana loy davar chashav. So if he goes and ends up carrying an item which has chashivos,
A plate, maybe.
right? Something which is useful for everyone. Chashav lakol, something which has a use to everyone. So then chayiv yilaveh. He'll be chayiv for carrying that amount on Shabbos, that size of that item. Davar she'ena chashav lakol, but if he's carrying something which is not, it doesn't have a use for everybody, the amount that he's carrying is insignificant for most. If it's something which his teacher stores away, so this size, the measurement of what he's carrying is something which is chashav to the teacher, it's a respectable, or it's a big enough size that the teacher likes it, the teacher needs it, he stores that amount, he wants to store that amount, so then the student will be chayav for carrying it, because he's acting on the das of his teacher.
Where's the carrying here? If you're
He's
inside
carrying.
the house, 1 second, if you're inside the house and the Rebbe says, go clear the table.
So he takes it outside the house to put in the garage.
Room in the house, he left it outside the door.
Yeah.
It's not obvious
Basically what,
tomorrow.
yeah, well, this is the way Rashi explains it.
So it's going
I'll
from
read
a
you
private
Rashi.
to a public domain?
Yes.
Is that- yeah.
Yeah, he's going from private to public domain. And basically, it's the way, what the Gemara means to say is that it's not talking about storing away. When the Gemara says that you're chayiv on even a smaller amount when you're storing something away, it doesn't mean that you're actually storing it. It's just giving you the size for carrying it. Again, you're being chayiv for carrying this item on Shabbos. How much of it? So it depends if you store this amount away or not. So if, in this case, what Abai is talking about is the student is carrying because the teacher told him to. So if it's something that the teacher would store away, if it's that amount, then the student would be chayav for carrying that amount. Okay? Clear enough?
The criteria is a davar chashuv.
Right. So the chiddush over here in this Gemara of Abaye is even if it's not a davar chashuv for him, it's a davar chashuv for his teacher, and he's acting on what his teacher said. He'll still be chayav for that. We're getting close to the bottom of Ayin Ches. There's the 2 dots there, right? Just
Oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, I might see.
a little further down. Amar Mar, 3 lines before the
Wide
lines
line.
get wide. Before the lines get wide.
Okay.
Amar Mar, just right over there. Amar Mar, you see that? Right
Oh,
there.
up here.
Yeah, right there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
There's a pointer right there. Perfect.
Okay. Amar Mar, another teaching. No, I'm sorry. We just did that. I'm sorry. You were right. Here. Oh, the next Amar Mar over here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Second wide line. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Amar Mar, Moedim Chachamim l'Rav Shimon. This is quoting the next part of that brisa which we're analyzing here. Amar Mar, Moedim Chachamim l'Rav Shimon b'moitzi shayfchin, if somebody carries out wastewater into the Rishus Harabim, sheshiyuron b'revius, that the amount that you would be chayiv for is a revius. So the Gemara's question. Gemara questions, shayfchin l'may chazu. What are you going to use wastewater for? What's a revius of wastewater useful for? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, "Legavel bohenes hatit," to make cement. So in order to mix the cement, you need to have a certain amount of water. So revius would be the right amount of water. So the Gemara was bothered from a brisa. The Gemara asks, "V'hatanya tit kedei lasos behen pikur." If somebody carries out tit, cement, on Shabbos, he'd be chayiv even if he carries out a very small amount, the amount which it takes to form the opening of a crucible.
Bottle.
Pikur. It's like a melting pot for metals. So they used to, the way Rashi explains this, they used to put in, what do they call it, like to give it, to fan it.
Bellow.
A bellow. So they had a little hole to insert or to give air. So the hole was like, there was this cement around the edge of the hole.
Like a crucible.
Yeah, crucible. Yeah, that's what Archibald said, I believe. Okay, so that's a very small amount of cement you'd be chayav for. So the Gemara is bothered. We said you need to carry out a revius of this wastewater, and what's the use? To mix it into the cement. But if you'd be chayav on carrying out such a small amount of cement on Shabbos, you should be chayav for carrying out a much smaller amount of this wastewater, because you definitely don't need a revius of water to mix it into the amount of cement which it takes to enforce the hole on this crucible. So the Gemara explains, like kasha, it's not a kasha. You can't ask, it's not a challenge. Ha de migbo, ha de loy migbo. When did we say we're chayav for carrying out tit on Shabbos, even in a very small amount? That's if it's already made. Here we're talking about the cement wasn't made yet. You're carrying out water to make cement, or is enough to make cement. A person won't go through the bother, the tircha, to make such a small amount of cement. So he'll carry out the amount, the smallest amount, like one recipe. The smallest amount that you need to make one recipe of cement. But if the cement is already made, then you're chayav even for carrying a much smaller amount of the ready-made cement. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. Again, we're still talking about different sizes or carrying out different things on Shabbos and what their uses are. based on what their uses are. Hamoitzi chevel kedei lasais oizen lekupa. If you carry out, you'd be chayiv for carrying out a rope on Shabbos, the size that you need to make a handle for a basket. Gemi is like reeds. How much of that would you be chayiv for carrying on Shabbos? Kedei lasais taloi lenapa ulakavra. Enough to tie around a sift or a sieve or a sift, like to hang it. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kedei lito mimenu midas minal lekatan. Enough of this gemi material to give to the shoemaker to make shoes for a child. So the normal way of making shoes in those days was you brought the material to the shoemaker and you gave the measurement of the child's foot, or anybody's foot for that matter, and they made shoes for you. So the amount that you would carry, the amount that you would need to give to the shoemaker to make shoes for a small child, that's how much you'd be chayav for carrying on Shabbos of this gemi. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Niyar, paper, which we'll see this is blank paper, which wasn't used yet. Kedei lichtov alav kesher muchsin. The size that you need to write on it a receipt from a toll receipt. We'll see, like, in order to cross the river in certain cities or a bridge, you have to pay a toll, like a tax, and in order to prove that you paid, you'd get a receipt. But this receipt had two letters on it, two big letters on it. So basically, it's like a font, the toll receipt font. You need to have a size paper that has enough room to have two big letters, toll receipt font. Okay? The hamaitzi kesher muchsin chayiv. If you carry out this actual, that's talking about if you carry out a blank piece of paper. Now the Mishnah tells us, let's say you carry out the actual receipt, the tax that you paid the toll, you'd be chayiv for that on Shabbos.
They actually had paper? I thought they were using skins mainly in those days.
For different things, we had they used paper also.
Papyrus.
What did you say?
Papyrus?
Papyrus.
Papyrus. I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. So
Like there was real paper?
I don't know if it's as advanced as it is today, but they had paper. Paper's a natural thing. It comes from the trees.
Papyrus.
Papyrus
What he
was
says
thicker.
they do with the first two.
Papyrus is
Invented the
No.
Egyptians.
Papyrus made from
Papyrus
reeds.
reeds, and it's
But
like
I don't
paper,
know
but it's
skin.
thicker than this.
I don't know what else they wrote on besides skin. Like
No, they wrote papyrus.
Yeah?
Yeah. I came.
Okay, so let's leave it at papyrus. Niyar machuk. If you have, we're still calling it paper. Paper that was erased. So it was already written on and then you erased it. So the way they explain it is that it doesn't have a use anymore. Rashi says, Einei roy lichtov. You can't write on it again. So obviously it's not like paper like we have today. Once you erase from this kind of from paper that they had in those days, it's no longer useful for writing on. So how much of that are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Kedei lachroich al sluchas katana shel plaiton. Enough to wrap around to use as a bottle stop, like a cover of a small bottle of perfume. Or leather, carrying out leather on Shabbos. How much of that are you chayav for? Kedei lasais kameya. Enough to make an amulet, kameya, but the way they explain it here is, no, not here, but I saw some explanation that it's to wrap the kameya. They don't actually write the kameya, the amulet, on the leather, because you can't write on leather, unless it's, I guess, work to a point that you could. But the leather that we're talking about here is to use it as a pouch, to wrap the kameya in, so it's even a smaller amount. Okay? Klaf, parchment. Kedei lichtov alav parsha ketana shebetfilin shehi shema Yisrael. The amount of parchment you'd be chayav for carrying on Shabbos is the amount that you need to write the smallest section, the smallest parsha that's in the tefillin, which is Shema Yisrael. Okay, there's 4 parshas in the tefillin. The smallest one is Shema. So that's the size of the parchment you'd be chayav for. Diyai, which is the ink we write with in the Torah and the tefillin. Kedei lichtov beis oisiyos. Enough ink to write 2 letters with. You'd be chayav on Shabbos for carrying. Kechol, this eye ointment, eye medication. Kedei litchol ein achas. Enough to medicate 1 eye. Devek is like glue. How much of that are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Kedei litein b'roish hashafshef. Enough to put on the top of a board. The Gemara, Rashi says the Gemara will explain what this is. The Gemara Mefarish Lo. Zefes the gofris. Tar and pitch. Kedei lases nekev enough to make a hole. So Rashi says, again, we're talking about some sort of melting pot where you had kesef chai, like silver, mercury. So you closed up the hole. You close up the hole with tar or pitch. Then you make a hole in the tar. So nekev dak lahaitzibai, and to pour out from there, you make a small hole in this tar. So that's how much you'd be chayav for carrying on Shabbos. Seems like a very small amount. Kedelas is nekev. Shava, wax. How much wax? Kedei litein al pi nekev katan. Enough to stuff up, to close a hole, a small hole. Charasis, crushed brick. Kedei lasos pikur shel tzarfei zahav. Enough to, again, like we said, to enforce the whole of this crucible that were used by gold refiners.
Oh, we eat that on Pesach.
No. Maybe it comes from a similar word. It's crushed or whatever. I don't know. Pikor Tzarfei Zahav. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. How much of this crushed brick? Kedei lasos pitput. Enough to make. Rashi says it's the pedestal where this tripod. Rashi actually says that tarpad. You see that the French word? To where this melting pot would sit on. So it's like the stand, the tripod. Okay. So what does it mean? It means that it's enough to repair it. Okay, a little amount of this crushed brick to repair this tripod. Subin is bran. How much of that are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Kedei litein al pi kur shel tzarfei zahav. Enough to put in as fuel at the opening of this gold refinery.
Bran like cereal bran?
Yeah. Not Kellogg's, but raw bran.
I think they use it as a fuel.
So there's two pshatim in Rashi, I think. Suban kedei litein al pi kur shel tzarfei zahav. The makam she'ein pcham in tzarfin. So if they don't have coal, places that they don't have coal, they use this. So Rashi only says one pshat, but I think I saw a different pshat also that it's used for something else. Maybe it's used to stuff up the hole to retain the heat.
Right.
Okay. Where are we up to here? Sid. Sid is limestone. Lime. Kedei lasud ketana shebebanais. They used to use it like to wax the hair of the girls. So how much of it are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Enough to use on a young girl, on a small girl. I think lasud ketana shebebanais toifloi sid lahasher saseir. So enough like on a small limb of a small child. So like a finger's worth of this sid. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer kedei lasos kilko. Enough to remove the hair of the temples. Rabbi Nechemia Aimer kedei lasud undefi. Enough to put on the forehead.
This is a stone, limestone, that you just like rub it on your skin or something?
I don't know how it was used, but they used it in some way as like for waxing. Lime.
Oh, lime.
Not limestone,
It's
just
like
lime.
It's like a schmear.
A schmear, okay. I guess lime comes from limestone, no?
Right.
I don't know.
Because these
Fresh
put
it
it
up,
on these
fresh it up.
buildings
Water.
too. Right?
Lime is finished product.
Use it.
Limestone is a raw one.
Right. Okay, yeah. Not so familiar with these products, but yeah. Okay, that's the end of the Mishnah. Let's see the Gemara. Chevel. So the Gemara asks, Chevel nami l'chayiv kedei lasis teloi l'napa ulakavra. We said in the Mishnah that you're chayiv to carry out a rope, a size to make a handle for your basket, right? Which is a little bit of a bigger size than the next item in the Mishnah, which was gemi. We said gemi enough that you're chayiv to use to hang this sieve or the sift, right? So the Gemara says, why aren't you chayiv for a smaller amount of rope? Enough to use what you're using the gemi for, enough to use to hang the sieve or sift. Why do we measure the chevel, the rope, with the basket and the gemi with the nap of a kavra? The Gemara answers, Kivan, the charik, since it's coarse, the rope, b'mana loy avdi inchi. People don't put it on their utensils, on their sieve or sift, because it'll ruin it. The rope will ruin it. So it's not a normal way of using it. So that's why we don't measure it that way. Tana Rabbanan. We were taught in a brisa. Hutzin, Rashi says here are lulav branches, the palm branches. How much of that are you chayav for carrying on Shabbos? Kedei lases oizen l'sal, kefifa mitzvahs. Enough to make a handle on this on a kind of basket, like a Rashi says, Sal ha'aseh mitsuri dekel, a basket made of these palm leaves. Sieve, how much are you chayiv for carrying sieve? Sieve is also something that grows around the palm tree. Rashi describes it as like a vine that grows on the bottom. It grows shegadol saviv hadekel ke'ein malbush, like it wraps around the palm tree. V'nichrach sevivaysav va'ola, and it like creeps up. It climbs up the palm tree.
Like a climbing vine.
A climbing vine. Okay. So how much of that are you chayiv for on Shabbos for carrying? Acherim oimrim. Kedei acherim say kedei litein al pi mashbech katan, enough to cover over like a small pouring vessel. L'sanen es hayayin. So they used it. I guess it was soft enough that you were able to pour the wine, or it was a material that was you were able to pour wine through, and it was used as like a sift to hold back the sediment. Ravav, this is grease. Rashi says shuman or shemen, grease or oil. Kedei lasach tachas aspagin, enough to smear under the wafer. Katana, a small one. So Rashi says, so they before they put it in the oven, they smeared some of this grease on it. I guess it was made it taste good, or
no, they used to bake it on the oven.
Yeah, you're right. That's right.
Take it off.
They used to stick it to the side of the oven, so it shouldn't be able to remove it properly. They put on this grease. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that amount of grease you'd be chayiv for to carry on Shabbos. How much is that? Kisela, the amount of a coin, a sela coin. We learned in a different brisa the amount to carry this grease to be chayiv on Shabbos is a gregeres, like a fig. The Gemara says that's both the same thing. A fig, this amount of a fig and the amount of a sela coin is the same thing. Okay, muchin. Kedei lasa, muchin is cotton. Kedei lasa is kador katana, to make a small cotton ball. That's how much you'd be chayiv for to carry. The kama shiurei, how much is that? Ke'egais, size of a nut. Okay, moving along in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Niyar kedei lichtei v'lav kesher muchsin, a piece of paper the size to write this toll receipt. So we said it's like the size to a size of paper to write two big letters on it. Tana. We were taught in a brisa. We learned in a brisa. Kama kesher muchsin. How much is kesher muchsin? Shtei oisiyos. Two letters. Kama kesher muchsin. Shtei oisiyos. Two letters. 1 second. Shtei oisiyos. Okay, so the Gemara asks for a minhu. We have a brisa which says different. It says, "Hamaitzi neyarcha." Look, if you carry out blank paper, im yesh b'kedei liftav shtei oisiyos. If there's enough, if it's big enough to write two letters, which here we assume it means two standard letters, not the big font like in the toll receipt, rather regular sized letters. Chayiv, you'll be chayiv. So it seems like even a smaller piece of paper you'd be chayiv for on Shabbos, not necessarily the size of a toll receipt. The im lav putter, and if it's not that big, it'd be putter. Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says, "My shtei oisiyos." When it says in this brisa the size of a paper for two letters, what does it mean? It means shtei oisiyos shel kesher muchsin. It indeed is the size of the big letters. So that's how Rav Sheshes explains the discrepancy. Rava says shtei oisiyos didan ubeis achiza. It means regular sized letters, so it would be smaller, but it also includes the piece of paper that we're talking about. Also includes a margin to hold on to the side where there's no writing, so it ends up the hainu kesher muchsin. It ends up being the same size as two big letters without the margin. Meisvei, we challenge this from a brisa. It says in a brisa, "Hamaitzi niyar machlok." If you carry out erased paper, v'shtar perua, or a loan document which was already paid, so it has no more use. We said also the erased paper has no use. Im yesh beluban shalai kedei lichtav shtei oisiyos, if on the white part of it, so like in the margin of the erased paper, or in the margin of this loan document which was never written on, so you could use it for writing. If in that part, in the white part of it, there is enough space to write two letters, or there's enough room to use the whole document, the whole piece of paper, to use as a cover of a small jug of this perfume. then chayiv. You'll be chayiv. The imlav putter, and if it's not big enough for that, you'd be putter. So now let's understand what the challenge is from the brisa. Bishlam al Rav Sheshes. We understand according to Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes explained the brisa before to mean the Amar Maishte Isis. What does the brisa mean when it says the size of the paper has to be 2 letters, enough to write 2 letters on it? Shte Isis Shal Kesher Muchsin. It's these 2 big letters. So fine, it makes a lot of sense. So if we have this other brisa that tells us that if you have an erased paper which was erased, or a paid a loan document which is already paid, if on the margin it's big enough to write 2 letters, Rav Sheshes will understand that to mean 2 big letters. So it has the same use as this piece of paper the size to write the toll receipt on. So that's good. Shaper. Elo Rava, but according to Rava, who explained that it means it's the size paper to write 2 regular size letters plus the margin. Elo Rava, the Amar Shtei Eis Didan, our size letters, regular size letters, Ubeis Achiza, plus a margin to hold the piece of paper with. The Hainu Kesher Muchsin, which ends up equaling the same size as a toll receipt piece of paper. Hacha Beis Achiza Leitzarech. In this case, where it's a already paid loan document, or a piece of paper which the words were erased from it, you don't need a Beis Achiza, because the part, let's say for the loan document where the words are, that could be your Beis Achiza, that could be the place where you hold it. And the only useful part of this piece of paper, this document, is the margin where you're going to write new letters on. So if you say it needs to be the size of 2 letters, it would not include an extra little bit for holding. It won't include a margin of Beis Achiza, so it won't end up equaling the Kesher Muchsin. So according to Rava, we don't understand. We have a question from this brisa which says if there's enough room in the margin of a paid loan document or an erased piece of paper to write 2 letters, according to Rava, it would mean 2 small letters. So it won't be the same size of the toll receipt like we said before. Kasha, the Gemara remains at a kasha. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, the brisa teaches us Hamaitzi Kesher Muchsin, if somebody carries the actual toll receipt. Before you showed it to the tax collector, before you showed it to the guy in the booth, chayiv, then you're chayiv because you have a use for it. You need to show it to him. Mishahareyu, once you showed it to him, you crossed the bridge and you showed it to the guy already. Or you crossed the river, whatever it is. Lemuchas, mishahareyu lemuchas. Once you showed it to the tax collector, putter. Then you should not be chayiv. You'll be putter from carrying this on Shabbos because it has no more use. Perhaps, but we're talking about the raisas here. We're talking about carrying, which is the raisa. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Av mishaharehu lemuchas chayiv. Even once you showed it to the tax collector, you'll still be chayiv. Why? Mipnei shetzaref lo, because you need it. So what do you mean you need it? The Tanna Kamma says you don't need it. Rabbi Yehuda says you do need it. My beinayu. What's the difference between them? What are they arguing? How do we explain their machlekes? Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Ika beinayu rehiti muchsa. The difference between the Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Yehuda would be the tax collectors had people that ran after people to do like random checks to make sure they really had it.
It's called a reassessment.
Reassessment, that's right. So the Rehiti Muchsa, Rehiti Muchsa, so the Tanna Kamma held, we don't care about that. Nobody will save the receipt. That's not considered enough of a use to be held chayav for carrying it on Shabbos. Nobody saves the receipt to show it to these secondary tax collectors. But Rabbi Yehuda held it is enough of a reason. Okay, Rava says muchas gadol, muchas katan. It's a little different than the first shot. Abaya said it was these people that ran after you to check. Rava says it's muchas gadol, muchas katan, like a primary tax collector and a secondary tax collector. Ika benayu, same thing. So the Tanna Kamma says people are worried about the secondary tax collector, so they'll save the receipt. And Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. You're not worried, so you won't save the receipt. Rabbi Yehuda says you will save the receipt to show it to the secondary tax collector. Rav Ashi Amar Chad Muchas Ika benayu. No, there's only one tax collector, one level. But why would somebody save it? To show it to a tax collector at a different juncture, a different bridge, a different crossing, to show him, look, I'm somebody who pays. He's not showing that I paid my dues for this crossing. He's showing I paid it at a different one to show that he's a person that's up to date in his taxes. His books are clean. Okay, it's already 10 after 9, so we have a choice to continue or to hold it here. It's a new thing. Should we stop here?
More time tomorrow.
Yeah? Okay.